I'm going to talk a little bit about my research on outdoor learning in primary schools. It is a research project that's sort of in some ways been concluded, but in some ways has potential to extend into different areas, etc. So I'll talk a little bit about that. It's had quite a lot of following, and I know some of you present will have heard me talk about it in various places and spaces before. So I'm sorry if I repeat a little bit about why I did it and the method, etc. But I really want to sort of talk about, you know, its impact and why it might have had impact, or why it might have some more, because obviously we're talking in terms of the Research Excellence Framework. The papers that you had to refer to are papers that have been reviewed internally and externally, and will at least one of them will be submitted to the ref. So while that's sort of one part of it, then, you know, the way in which I've sort of developed the research project to output in that way is important, but equally important, I think, it is for the practice element. So, you know, what have I done that makes a difference to what is the benefit to people in schools? What is the benefit to teachers and to students and pupils in schools? So I'm going to quickly just go through what I did, the summary of research, the findings, the dissemination outputs, and then just a little bit about, well, where do we go next? And that might be a sort of focus for a quick discussion or a longer discussion. I don't know. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen now.
While Heather's doing that, I'd just like to welcome people who've just joined. It's excellent to see you all at our lightning talk. And just to remind you, because Linda will be very cross if I don't do this, that if you would like to present, please get in touch with us. I think it's just loading, Heather, which is great.
I wonder whether it might take a while, actually, because it seems to load very easily on Zoom, but not on Skype.
Yeah. I think we're all moving to Blackboard. I've forgotten what the word is now. Anyway, we're moving to a Blackboard thing.
Collaborate.
Collaborate. Thank you. Thank you. Blackboard Collaborate soon. So hopefully things will speed up a little bit.
See if I can share the desktop rather than. You see any of that?
I can see desktop. I can't see anything on it as yet. It's black at the moment, Heather.
All right. Okay. Perhaps I can't.
Is it a PowerPoint that you're sharing? Okay.
Fine. With the PowerPoint. Maybe I just got to. Well, perhaps I'll just talk to it then.
Oh, something's coming actually. Your desktop has come and it's on the screen where it says your meeting will open in a new Skype for Business window.
All right. I'm just trying to.
It probably just takes over.
I'm trying to share the PowerPoint now.
Okay.
It's uploading. Okay, so I'll just talk about the rationale, because that's the first slide. So there's quite a lot of work being happening in terms of why you need more research data, and this was an empirical research study, so I was actually collecting primary data from teachers. There was a lot in the outdoor sort of learning press and professional bodies about more research data needed to evidence practice, gap in how teachers and the outdoor, how teachers are seeing the outdoor classroom, how they're using it, and why they're using it or not using it. So that was quite important. But I think the main sort of drive for doing the research was about thinking about, again, good practice, what was important about it and the value that could be placed on outdoor learning. Obviously, I'm an advocate of that, but I do know that in schools, there's a lot of competing pressures, a lot of competing areas for teachers to attend to, performativity, metrics, all the rest of it. And so outdoor learning being a non-mandatory curriculum area, other than outdoor and adventurous activities being part of the physical education curriculum, is very much sometimes sidelined. So that's a challenge, really. So those were the things where I really wanted to sort of see what, if I could make any benefit, if I could make some sort of impact through gathering some data about the sort of the use that teachers are making of it, and the strive and emphasis that they can place on it. So this the research was actually done in 2 stages. There was a survey originally in 1995, so that's going back quite a long time now, 25 years, but when the second survey was in 2017, so that was only 22 years difference. And the first survey was done as part of consultancy. So one of the sort of tips I would give to people that is, if you get any money to do any research, any funding, then think about the wider benefits you might, or the wider things you might take from that research design. So I was trying to find out about a certain thing for this consultancy, but I also thought, well, some of these questions would be really useful in terms of finding out how teachers are using their spaces and places and what the challenges are for them, etc., etc. So I was able to put questions on there. And then in 2017, I replicated that survey. I did change the terminology from outdoor education, which was more prevalent in the 1990s, to outdoor learning, which is maybe a bit broader, in 2017. Originally it was all done paper surveys. When I repeated it, I did try to do it online to schools, including writing individually to each head teacher. But that wasn't at all successful. I think if you look in the research methods books, places like Cohen, Mannion, Morrison, they say that for education research, if you're trying to go get sort of answers from schools, from teachers within schools, at that time when they weren't looking online so much, then postal surveys or written surveys would be more successful. And indeed, I did get a better response rate from teachers. So I tried to replicate the schools as well. I had, I think, out of the first survey, I got 61 responses, the second survey, 40. So not huge numbers of schools. These were all primary schools in England. In terms of replication, I only had 11 that replicated the schools, but then some schools had closed, some had changed and merged, some had changed phases, etc. So it was quite, it was difficult to replicate exactly. I asked them, the teachers, to say how they were responding, really, whether they were responding in terms of the phase that they were responsible for, or the phase that they were making the responses for: early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and locations, whether they considered their school to be urban, suburban or rural. So it was very, very sort of broad. So what did I find out? Well, I asked them about the locations that they were using for outdoor learning. And predominantly in both years, it was exactly the same. They were using their playgrounds, and that extended to, I think, green areas around the school as well. Day visits were the next location that they used. But in 2017, the next thing on the list really were residentials, which was quite interesting, because we sort of thought that residential visits actually would have decreased, but proportionately they had increased, or the schools reporting had increased the importance of residentials for outdoor learning. That was above the local area as in the previous year. So the curriculum areas that teachers were using, in 1995, it was very much through geography, then science, environmental education, and outdoor education actually came up as an area that they saw as a curriculum area. It's maybe that we were training teachers in outdoor education at that time. In 2017, everything sort of went down the list, and physical education was at the top of it, presumably because there is as I said, 1/6, I think, of it is outdoor adventurous activities. I also wanted to know about teacher expertise, and that had decreased over time. So I've got all these figures on this wonderful PowerPoint that I can't show you. In 1995, 53% has some stated expertise, and I said what that expertise was in the questionnaire, and it went down to 41%. So that was a decrease of 12% in terms of their teacher expertise. And then I asked how they saw outdoor learning or outdoor education. What was the optimum reason for implementing outdoor education? And interestingly, in 1995, it was environmental education or nature-based activities. But in 2017, it was very much personal social education, and including teamwork, and physical education, physical activity came a close second. I'd be quite interested to see whether that's changing now, because there's quite a lot of emphasis on using the outdoors for enhancing a relationship with nature and environmental education, albeit perhaps in a different way, or sustainability education. So it'd be interesting to see whether that's swinging at all. I asked teachers about policies or curriculum change helping or hindering outdoor education or outdoor learning, and interestingly, things that helped were, and this is more currently, were teacher and leader training. Forest School came into the lexicon in 2017, not surprisingly, and access to good areas. So some schools were saying, well, they had a forest that was very welcoming to the school, that enabled them to use it in lots of different ways. Hindering, budget, paperwork, and some schools reported that they'd expanded and the buildings had been built on the school grounds, so there was no space to do any outdoor learning very locally. Factors affecting provision, time and expense in both years. Expense more so in 1995, time much more so in 2017, so the time of teachers. And yeah, so I'll move on to, I think those are the main things. I think there were major challenges and barriers to implementation of, they were very similar, as I said, in both years, and that was a key aspect in the qualitative comments about why teachers were struggling to implement it. So out of that research, really, the first sort of way I gathered all the data, and it was through it was really through coding and theming of the responses and gathering the quantitative data together. I drew out 5 key sort of themes for good practice, I suppose, 5 ingredients that I thought were key to making outdoor learning work in primary schools. And those were having a suitable location, so safe and accessible, really. The teacher values are really important, so the beliefs of individual teachers or group of teachers or the head teacher driving the school in terms of, where to place the emphasis of their non-mandatory time, I suppose, would make outdoor learning happen. Curriculum interpretation was a third thing, so thinking about how to use outdoor learning within a range of subjects across the curriculum or a range of topic areas was quite important. To see outdoor learning, fourthly, in terms of risk-benefit, culture of risk-benefit. So there was a benefit to going outdoors. And initiatives were quite important as well. So forest schools were Forest Fridays, Welly Wednesdays, grandparents gardening time outdoors in a school wildlife garden or a school allotment or something like that. Those types of things seem to sort of just trigger engagement and the sort of the way that the schools would work. The other thing that the second paper that I really wanted to work on was just this might be of interest to some of our Institute of Education colleagues, about this idea about teacher values and beliefs and how strongly they can carry the implementation of outdoor learning in a school. And so that was set in the framework, really, the theoretical framework of values and beliefs, but to do with their autonomous space. So how their own values and professional identities are balanced within the curriculum provision. So if they have any autonomy as to what to put in the non-mandatory, non-prescribed parts of the curriculum, or not so much prescribed, then what would they put outdoor learning? And some of them would, certainly the people who responded would. And that came into sort of professional identity as well, as a curriculum maker. So I think there's some writing on Lambert and Biddulph who talk about a signature part of teachers' identity is as a curriculum maker, and that's balance between curriculum and pedagogy and how you do all this. So all these things are interlinked. And the last thing really was about the personality of change. So Goodson talks about the theory of change, about how you match all this space and curriculum making with your own personal beliefs, and how you put that alongside all the prescribed and the curriculum change and the governance change that comes along. How you can vest, I suppose, your own personal beliefs and values in making something happen, which was key to outdoor learning. So those are the sort of, that's the amount of research I'm doing for time. So what next? Well, as I say, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to present this in various fora, and I've had papers published. I did want to find out we do have research practice hubs as part of our outdoor learning network in the UK, really, and we've talked about this with practitioners, but I did want to take it out a little bit further. So I have hoping to take it to the Council for Learning Outside the Classroom conference, which is now in February. It was in November. They're still hoping to hold it one day once, and that's more of a workshop about this is where this is at. The data originally does have some data for secondary schools within it, not quite in the same format. And I did think, it'd be lovely to repeat that. In fact, we've got a master's student who I'm not sure whether is with us today, but he's very interested he's setting out to actually survey individual teachers rather than teachers representing schools, so to speak. And there was some data about 5 themes for 21st century student outcomes for outdoor learning, which were proposed through the Natural Connections project by Karen Malone and Sue Waite. And I'd asked the more recent respondents in 2017 what they thought about these and whether they'd add any others. And those data need looking at. Well, they have been analysed, but they haven't been taken forward at all. And just wondering what else really as well. So I thought that's something I could put out here and see what you all thought really. I'm sorry about this, it's still loading. That's probably my internet or the number of pictures that I put in of young people outdoors. Sorry.
That's great. Heather, thank you so much. That's absolutely fabulous. are we opening it up to questions in a moment?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Just before we open it up for questions, and people do unmute if you would like to ask your question yourself, that's absolutely fine. But if you want me to ask it, put it in the chat box, and put it in the chat box anyway, so that we can all have a look. I just would like to say, giving people. Oh, it's just come up, Heather.
Yes.
There we go. Fantastic. So while you're finding particular bits on there that you'd like to draw our attention to, Heather, I would just like to point out to people that Heather's work is of such significance worldwide, not just in this country. She is such an esteemed colleague. She would probably never say so herself because she's so modest, but it really has been monumental, the significance that her research and the others working with her have had on outdoor education and then subsequently outdoor learning. And I should have said at the beginning that we're very lucky to have Heather heading up one of our themes, our 3 themes in Learning, Education and Development Research Centre. So Heather heads up the outdoor learning one, and maybe Heather and Chris Loynes would like to talk a little bit about how that relates to the other research centres, maybe a little bit later. But if anybody's got any questions now, would they like to ask them?
Or to see any of the data now that I can show you in terms of the sort of summary data here.
I mean, it's been good having a quick look at that while you've, now you've got that up, Heather. One question I'd like to ask is really this idea about teacher values. I'm very interested in what you were saying about that, Heather, and the fact that personal beliefs about education is quite significant and quite important. I remember many moons ago when I was a primary school teacher, the highlight for me and for my year 5 and 6 children, I worked in a very big middle school in Oxfordshire, and the highlight would be going on our field trip. And I, for my sins, it's before I had children, so I suppose that's why they gave me the job. I had to organise the field trip, so we took 150 year 5 and 6s up to the Peak District from Oxford on coaches. And I have to say, all the teachers and all the parental helpers that we took with us, we all said it was amazing the kind of personalities that you see that you wouldn't see in the classroom. It's a completely different, it sheds a completely different light on young people, and it shed a light on our beliefs about education and what education is and should be. So I'd just like to ask you, do you think that field trips are able to be as important now as they were, 25 years ago? Have you noticed a shift at all?
I think they are as important, and I think that, as you can see from the data, that some schools are choosing to go further away and stay overnight than they are to use the local area beyond the so-called playground. So I think they are, and I think there's been more research now about what is it that makes it so important for learning. We have got a PhD student attached to the LED Research Centre who is looking into the changes in relationships professional relationships between staff and students. She's doing it in a secondary school, but as a result of outdoor learning experiences. So that's quite important. I mean, I think I have Professor Pete Boyd to thank a tremendous amount for supporting me with this, because he actually suggested some of the theoretical frameworks that I might look at, because I'm coming from, I'm not so familiar. I'm a qualified teacher, but I haven't been teaching for quite a while because I've been in higher education, not in school, so to speak, teach students. And I think he'd asked, said to me, why don't you look at the curriculum, the curriculum maker type literature? And there's quite an emphasis as well on theory of change in outdoor learning research at the moment. That's what a reflection, we've had a big review of the effectiveness of outdoor learning research, and that part of that has been you need a theory of change. So when I came across this sort of Goodson's theory of change and this personality of change being important, so the teachers' commitments, beliefs, investments and ownership of their work, and the balancing of the personal and external forces of change was really important, because if teachers are not invested in what's been sort of prescribed for them, then they're just sort of perhaps not as accepting, or they're just doing it. There's no meaning to them. It's just personal involvement. It's just doing the job rather than the real belief that they can create something different from the learning. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
No, that's great. Thanks, Heather. Marie had a question. I'll ask for her because I know she sometimes struggles with the internet. Why did you change from outdoor education to outdoor learning?
Yeah, I mean, our professional body at the moment, and more recently, is called the Institute for Outdoor Learning. And outdoor learning is described quite broadly in terms of learning outside the classroom and learning outdoors in a variety of settings, I suppose. And I just felt it was much more, it was a bit broader for what schools might be doing. Outdoor education and environmental education were two, not separate things, they were linked, but they were two separate sort of themes in 1995. And outdoor education could involve environmental education. So I just felt that perhaps the more contemporary term the teachers would recognise was outdoor learning. And I think they use that in the sort of forest schools talk as well. But I'm not sure, what is education? I think it's quite, it wasn't nothing more than that. It was just a sort of acceptance of the term. It wasn't about whether it was more student or pupil centred. And people still use outdoor education. Higher education institutes use outdoor education. They use it in different parts of the world as well. It's much more common in Australia and to a certain extent in North America as well. So not sure whether that was Biesta Marie saying we have a language of learning but not of education.
Does anybody else have any questions for Heather?
I do. Am I all right to jump in?
You can.
Okay.
Who's
Heather,
speaking?
It's Lisa.
Oh, it's Lisa.
Reed. Hiya. I just wanted to ask you, Heather, because my experience is a secondary school teacher, and I also do some work with care schools, so children who are in care and there is education provision for them, is that a lot of the secondary schools will use outdoor ed for curriculum, so field trips to support data gathering for geography or biology, whereas the care schools tend to use outdoor ed more as like the team building activity, so more about building self-esteem, about communication, collaboration, working together, so going out to do outdoor like residential type things. And I wondered if your data showed that distinction.
I don't know in the terms of the secondary school data because I haven't analysed it.
Right,
yet.
okay.
But in terms of the primary school data, there were, so to speak, special schools within those data. They were seeing outdoor learning as very important for sensory work,
right?
Very important for gross motor skills, really, of movement, I think, and working with certain tools and instruments and things that they could collect. So those are the things that were really emphasised by those sort of schools. I think it depends. That's probably quite a good sort of separation in what's happening. I know that the student I was telling you about, who's doing a doctorate on staff-student relationships, has found it quite challenging to find a secondary school where they are implementing outdoor learning on a regular basis, because she wanted it within the curriculum, not as a sort of add-on, etc. Yeah. And there are schools that are committed to that, so there's an outdoor learning day, cross-curricular, using all the different subjects on one day a week, for example, particularly in the lower secondary school, year 7, year 8 type of work. But a lot of it is very curricular, subject-based, and for data gathering for field work in geography, biology, science perhaps, and towards probably projects for GCSEs, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to send you an email after this, because I'm very interested in your PhD student who's doing their work on relationships. Certainly in my PhD, that was one of the things that came out very strongly, that the strengthening of relationships between teachers was much greater after they'd experienced an outdoor type event together, and that really helped with their discussions in school and everything else. So I'm really interested around that data that's coming through there as well. So I will I'll send you an email about that separately. But no, thank you for that.
No, thank you. I mean, it is a very complex area, agency and power relationships, as well as so what happens if the relationships improve? Does that affect learning? Is that just related to learning in schools, or is there more in the home environments that affect their relationship with adults? Oh, it's very complicated. I think she is having to narrow it a little bit, but if you can help, that's fantastic.
I'd be just very interested to see the kind of things that you're coming up with there as well. So okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask Heather?
I think while people are thinking, I think one of the somebody else here. One of the important things I've sort of learned from this isn't a huge data set, really. I mean, it did have quite a lot of questions and data that emerged from it, but they weren't huge data sets. Some people now are putting things online, social media, and particularly some of this COVID-19 related research, and hundreds and hundreds of responses from sort of wide range of people. And yet, it's quite interesting what's come out of that, with that caveat, really, and how I've managed to get things published, which seem to have been quite well received. The first paper, the one on the lessons for good practice, I thought that, comparing 2 years, what was the point of that, really? I should really draw out some things for good practice. It was interesting, but where was the benefit for children nowadays? The referees on the paper actually came back and said, you need to look more about the changes. That's what the interesting bit of it is. But that is the most downloaded paper in the last 15 months in that journal, by far, by about 1,000 downloads. I mean, that's what I'm interested in talking to the practitioners about, really, in terms of, well, is it of use to you? Does it resonate? And I know people have come up to me and said, yeah, that's really good. Or am I just talking to the converted? And I guess in Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, I would be talking to the converted, people who believe in it anyway, probably.
But I suppose, if you're talking to the converted, there might be 1 or 2 teachers in each school who are the converted, but then, given your research and your enthusiasm, they would then presumably be enthused to talk to the others in their school, because not everybody is the converted, are they, in individual schools?
No, I mean, interestingly, you probably know, I don't know whether everybody knows, but we've had a master's student now a couple of years ago, really, who was an assistant head teacher in a primary school. And she has this little catchphrase, "Can I do it outside?" Sidio, which she's been putting across for a whole school approach, and her master's thesis was on, this is an MA, not a doctorate, but this is, you know, about really moving the whole school to using the outdoors across the curriculum, at least every class, every child going out at least once a day. And she found, once she's implemented that she found that she had no space to go outside very easily because everybody else was out there with all their classes. She's a year 6 teacher as well as the assistant head teacher, so that's quite interesting. So it'd be too successful, but I think it's really helped now actually, because they're now planning to, how can they work with all the restrictions that are being imposed for school-based work, and they're looking to see what they can learn, what can be outside, etc., and how they can teach and work with the children meaningfully. And there's a message from Marie I see here about values and beliefs. So yeah, of course, do email me. And I think you had, if you're on the registration list, I think you had a couple of the links to the papers. I think the one on teacher values is embargoed at the moment, so it might not be fully available in Insight, but if you can get it on the database, you can find it there.
Yeah. Liz Bates, are you typing a message? Would you like to actually ask it?
I'm really sorry, I was just typing that I've got to go because I've got to prep for I'm doing a masterclass and I've got to log on early and get ready for it. But I just was wanting to say thank you, Heather, because I found that really interesting. It's such an amazing piece of work.
Thank you very much, Liz. I'm sorry about the slides.
No, not at all. It was really interesting. It was quite good to have them after, but it was quite good just to listen to you chatting about it to begin with, just, you know, if I'm honest. So yeah, no, thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, I think that if there's anything else, you know, you're welcome to ask. But one of the other things that Pete Boyd actually advised me to do was actually to place the findings of the paper, of the research, of the data as the title of the paper. So the title of that latter paper, well, it is The Sustained Value Teachers' Place on Outdoor Learning. So actually I said what I was, and I thought that was brilliant advice. And that again has sort of been quite successful in the realms of readability, I suppose, and downloads, etc. When you look on the metrics of it, not that I think again that's most important, but I think, you know, in terms of practice terms, that idea of how is this teacher's values and beliefs translated into the opportunities for learning for young people, and you know, what do they gain by it? Because it must be the same in drama and music, etc., in terms of, you know, if you've got a passionate teacher or something creative, maybe if they can use their autonomous space or their pedagogic approach in the ways that they want to really enthuse the children, motivate them, interest them, use the environments and places and spaces that they want the children to engage and get excited about, then maybe the learning does improve.
Absolutely. I'm just aware of the fact that there are quite a lot of Institute of Education colleagues who've got experience of working in schools and supervising student teachers in schools. I wondered if any of you have got any questions that you'd like to ask Heather, or any musings that you have. There's Sue Temple, Lisa McGregor, I haven't got the list up at the moment, but and Carolyn, I think, Reed and Karen Watson. Is there anything that you would like to say? Is there anything that Heather's been talking about that resonates with you, that, you know, might be of use for you in your work with student teachers? Because I know when I worked with the PGCE 1 year primary, a lot of them were very interested in how they could use outdoor learning in other subjects, a bit like what you were describing earlier, Heather. And so one of the students was particularly interested in maths learning, and children that found number bonds and mathematical concepts really difficult to grasp. So literally took them outside onto the playground and got them all spaced out looking at a particular mathematical concept in a physical way, rather than an academic mental way in the classroom that was a bit more abstract. So that would still count as outdoor learning, wouldn't it? Oh yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you do it with your students. We have an optional module in third year where I try and work with the school, and again, it's can you work with all the school or as many classes as the school can sort of enable to work with us, I guess. But I think some of our students who are used to walking on mountains with, where 10 other people might be quite a big group, to have, well, it's 120 children today from 3 to 11 or something. But yes, I mean, we've been challenged by all sorts of topics, all sorts of curriculum areas, really. Although I do find that I don't know whether this is the case, a lot of the teachers, when you say, well, what would you like us to sort of, what are the objectives, what are the outcomes, or what's the curriculum area or the topic? And they'll give us maybe the topic areas that they're working on, but they often say, we just want the children to go outside and talk to each other and, talk to the adults that you bring and the facilitators and experience something that they won't have on a normal school day, just the sensory idea of it, or particularly the PSE, I'd say, PSHE, I suppose.
Yeah.
That teamwork, those meta skills, that's what they seem to emphasise, rather than the curriculum areas particularly. So, well, we're doing our environment, but that'll fit in anyway. But sometimes it's been more challenging. I mean, we've done things with...
I was going to say, on the undergraduate third year, 3-year degree, I know Sue's here as well, we do have a module which is on learning environments, because when I did some research about using the outdoor classroom, I think, I'm not even sure, it was the manifesto, the Learning Outside the Classroom manifesto said that actually trainee teachers lacked sort of knowledge and skills and teachers about taking children outside. So we decided to, because a lot of us, are advocates of going outside for learning, and not just taking what you have in a classroom and doing the same outside, actually using the outdoors to improve knowledge and skills. So we actually have that module in our degree at the moment, and the first research that I did was about the outdoor classroom, and it was early years students, and for early years children, they have to go outside for a lot of time. If they have free flow time, they go outside, and a lot of the students said that having an outdoor classroom, which we have at Carlisle, where we can take trainee teachers outside to experience it, change their attitudes for going outside. Which that I've been doing the last 2 years is based around the teacher trainees as well, and Chris knows about Chris Loynes. I've been sort of working with as well about where the students were where they first came in, how the university sessions potentially have had an impact on them, and I've just finished or sent out a survey to ask really how the coronavirus maybe has changed their attitudes for going outside, and maybe the value of taking children outdoors. So I haven't got them all in yet, but I think that sort of will be quite interesting. And going back to what you said about outdoor education and learning outside the outdoor education and outdoor learning, the other one into that mix is learning outside the classroom. There are about 3 different things that are different. So I just thought I'd add that to. In addition
to what Lisa's just explained, we also have a Learning Outside the Classroom conference day on Carlisle campus as well, that all of our second year students attend. and we take them all to the museum and the castle that day. And we have a variety of different organisations who do workshops with the students over the day. So that might be museums, but equally it could be Watch Tree Outdoor Centre. It could be, I'm trying to think who's offered, English Heritage. All kinds of different people come and do the workshops. And the students really find that interesting, and it really helps them see how learning outside the classroom isn't just about being outdoors, it's about being outside the classroom, so in a different environment. And that feeds in really well to our learning environments module.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great, Sue and Lisa. Oh, and Georgia's got a question. Georgia, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I suppose less of a question than an observation, really. That oh, sorry, I'm messing about in the video. Just that I've done a little bit of writing around SMSC and residential trips particularly. So it links to PHSE really, but I think that a lot of outdoor learning and residential trips particularly offer real opportunities for spiritual development particularly, but also social and moral development, because I think you experience different aspects to your children in those contexts. They experience different aspects of each other, but also you as a teacher see different aspects of them, I think, which I think is very powerful for everybody. So yeah, I think there's an interesting link there with values and PHSE, I think.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I mean, the social developments all of them very important, and I have written myself years ago on spiritual development, really this sort of sense of awe and wonder for being outdoors and noticing and that importance of place. And of course that you asked us, Sally, about the link to CMPPA, so the Centre for National Parks and Protected Areas. Chris Loynes is the lead for human nature relations. So a lot of this is where the research centres makes really is cross research centre, because children and nature are part of that. It's part of being outdoors a lot of the time, although there is maybe less nature in some places and more nature in the others, and there are important parts of being together outdoors, perhaps in a less than natural space, but that's something we've sort of still got a lot of cross discipline interest there. So cultural learning, yeah, there's a lot of learning. I mean, there is, I think, in some of the people that are involved in outdoor learning work, they see educational field visits as slightly different to some of the outdoor learning that you might sort of do through curriculum work that you as a teacher would sort of facilitate or lead. But it's all important, and certainly the manifesto talks about educational visits, etc., museums, and that's all important side of things.
Yeah, so we've got a comment from Sue about cultural learning. So many of the students haven't actually visited a museum. And then Anne Kendrick. Anne, did you want to expand upon your point about there's developing cognitive work in cognitive science about how learning happens through dual coding and also embodied cognition, Lakoff and Johnson?
Yeah, I can only say very little because it's all quite new to me. So within cognitive science, they're really asking the question, how does learning happen? How do schemas get built in the brain? And there's a fairly strong research that indicates that the working memory can take in information in two simultaneous channels. So one is a visual sketch pad, and the other is called an auditory loop. And it is not the same as visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning preferences. And then as people have started talking about this work that was done in 1980 about embodied cognition. So it's looking at how we take information in through literally our knowledge of the world as an embodied approach. So they're pointing out things like how an awful lot of our metaphors for things like, you know, happy is feeling up and sad is feeling down. So a lot of the metaphors we use to describe more abstract concepts are embodied terms. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Why I was thinking it was relevant is in the postgrad module on high quality learning and teaching, we are obviously looking at what is learning, and therefore one of the options we have within that is for students to explore more about outdoor learning. So I'm trying to think ahead, how do we make this connection clearer in terms of the link between the cognitive science around what is learning and also what do we think about high quality learning and teaching within an outdoor learning context?
There is
Heather, if you've got any tips.
Yes, well there is a publication which you can get online called High Quality Outdoor Learning. It was called High Quality Outdoor Education. It's published by the English Outdoor Council. Now the Outdoor Council is association, the Outdoor Education Advisors Panel as well, OEAP. So that was published more latterly, and that's another reason I suppose we're changing the term. But it's outdoor learning in 2015, outdoor education in 2005. So that defines the outcomes that you would hope for outdoor learning, and also the indicators. And it's quite a nice little publication, and I know that schools are using that quite a bit to try and work out whether they're outdoor learning. And we've also had some work on aligning outdoor learning to the sort of Ofsted inspection frameworks, and that's been quite interesting, because a lot of providers, perhaps not sort of people who are teaching in schools, teachers and senior leaders, etc., but the people that are providing it, as in the museums, the outdoor centres, etc., are saying, well, of course it's high quality, you know, we've got all these resources and the children love it, they're always smiling. No, that's not necessarily the way that there's high quality, and the research has shown that it's progressive experiences are important, and autonomy of learning, independence of learning is important as well, that the children feel that they have ownership of it rather than being it's all sort of put on for them. I think a lot of museums are key to that interactive learning, and outdoor learning is part of that as well. A lot of what we do are experiential and first-hand, and also the interactive, as well as the relationship building between teachers and students or pupils. So you might want to look at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, well, we're almost drawing to the close of today's session, so I'd just like to thank everyone for asking questions and for interacting. It's been a really rich discussion, thank you. But first and foremost, thank you very much, Heather, for giving us a really interesting talk of this research that has spanned a quarter of a century, and also for helping us think about how this can affect our own practice. And for those of you who are still a little bit unsure about what LED, Learning, Education and Development Research Centre, is about, can I please encourage you to have a look at our website, find out a bit more about us, and do get involved. We're really keen to involve lots of people at the University of Cumbria and outside, teachers in schools, particularly in this area, to work with us, and Heather's involved in quite a few projects, as am I, that really looks at exploring this kind of outdoor learning and so on with young people. So please get in touch, and we will be asking you as well to join us in our research projects. And again, can you please support James Birch in his talk on the 8th of July, and can you please volunteer to take a session